Hey guys, tonight we drift far away from noise and neon, from timelines and textbooks, and we land, gently, quietly, among the rice paddies of ancient China. It's late, maybe past midnight. You're wrapped in a thick robe made of woven hemp. Your feet are bare, and the air smells like damp soil and wood smoke. Crickets hum like they've never had a break. And just behind you, nestled between clumps of bamboo, there's a sound. Pop. Then another. A muffled crack. It startles you at first, until you remember that's just the bamboo. It's supposed to do that. See, tonight we're exploring one of the strangest bedtime companions in all of history, the exploding bamboo of ancient Chinese villages. Yes, people slept near bamboo that cracked and burst in the night. Not only that, they often relied on it for safety, for ritual, and maybe even for sleep itself. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it over there? I love reading your locations. It helps me feel like I'm talking to someone real, even if we're on opposite ends of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're lying on a woven mat inside a stilted hut. The floor creaks faintly beneath your back. Above you, the bamboo ceiling lets soft moonlight in through its tiny gaps. You hear something outside, another crack. It's not loud, more like a gentle split in the air. You glance toward the window and spot the long green poles of bamboo standing in thick rows, their outlines glowing silver in the moonlight. In this part of ancient China, southern provinces like Guangxi and Yunnan, where humidity clings to your skin and frogs live in your walls, bamboo wasn't just a plant. It was a lifestyle. It made up your bed frame, your tools, your cups, and sometimes even your music. And most curiously, it also made up your night security system. Here's what most people today don't realize. Fresh, living bamboo explodes when heated. It's not a myth or legend. It's science. As the internal chambers of the bamboo fill with steam or heat, pressure builds up. The result? A sharp pop or crack, almost like a firework. Sometimes it even splits open with a hiss. Now imagine that effect happening during the cooler hours of the night, especially if the bamboo had soaked in the sun all day. That's what you're hearing. It wasn't dangerous, just dramatic. So why, you ask, would someone want that sound outside their window as they sleep? Well, here's where it gets interesting. According to both folklore and archaeological theory, many farmers believed the spirit world was sensitive to sudden noise. Some claimed demons hated the cracks. Others said wild animals, wolves, panthers, even wandering bandits, were startled by the sudden bursts and kept their distance. So, instead of guard dogs, some villagers relied on a perimeter of fresh bamboo to serve as a kind of acoustic scarecrow. Pop, crack, snap, sleep. Of course, not everyone agrees. Historians still argue whether exploding bamboo was used intentionally this early, or whether the stories grew out of coincidence. Maybe villagers didn't know why the bamboo popped. They just noticed fewer chickens went missing when it was planted around the coop. Maybe they saw a tiger twitch at the sound once and decided it was worth keeping. But others argue the use was intentional and layered, serving both ritual and practical purposes. In temple ceremonies, for instance, burning bamboo was used to drive off evil spirits, the sharp sound acting as a spiritual broom. It's not a stretch to imagine that rural families adopted the idea for their own homes. After all, who wouldn't want a bit of supernatural pest control? You reach out and run your hand along the smooth edge of a bamboo pole beside the doorway. It's cool and damp from the night air. Your host family told you earlier that this stalk is only a few days old, cut fresh from the grove to make the fence outside. They even showed you how to lean the stalks so the morning sun hits them just right, just enough to build a tiny reservoir of heat that would release at night. It's strange, isn't it? How sound can be so closely tied to safety. Today, we think of alarms, sirens, barking dogs. But for a 9th century farmer in the southern mountains of China, safety came in the form of a bamboo pop. Now, let me paint you a more vivid picture. You're walking through the early evening mist. The hills are quiet except for frogs and insects. You're carrying a small clay pot of fish oil to rub on the oxen's feet. Don't ask why. It's apparently good luck before planting season. As you pass your neighbor's home, you see a ring of bamboo planted not in rows, but in a circle. That's not for farming. It's for sleeping. Inside the circle, they've built a sleeping hut with woven reed W. The morning arrives not with a loud alarm or rush hour horns, but with mist that slides down the hills like a silk scarf and the slow chirping of magpies hidden in the reeds. You stretch beneath your woven blanket and blink up at the bamboo slats overhead, watching the golden light creep through the gaps like warm tea being poured into a cracked bowl. Outside, the air smells of dew and damp soil, with a faint note of charcoal, leftovers from someone's early fire. You step outside and the ground feels cool beneath your feet. A rooster crows from the distance, and then, unexpectedly, pop. Another bamboo stalk gives out a lazy crack, like it's sneezing in its sleep. This time you don't even flinch. You smile instead. Funny, isn't it? Something that could startle you just hours ago now feels like part of your internal rhythm. Your host, an old farmer with a beard that curves like a crescent moon, waves at you from the far end of the paddies. He's already knee-deep in a slow-moving canal, adjusting what looks like a hand-carved sluice gate. His voice is soft when he speaks, but not tired. "You hear the bamboo last night?" he asks with a grin. You nod. "Good. It means the stalks are fresh. They're still listening." Still listening. Not watching, not guarding, listening. That's how they think of it here. The bamboo doesn't protect you through strength, but through attention, through awareness. An idea that's both poetic and oddly comforting. As you sip your rice porridge near the hearth, the old man tells you a story passed down in his village about how, long ago, a young boy wandered too far into the forest and was chased by a leopard. He ran, and just as the leopard was about to pounce, a bamboo stalk exploded near its ear, scaring it off. The boy escaped. Since then, he says, no one plants rice without first planting bamboo near the edges. Now, you and I both know that story may not be entirely factual. Historians still debate whether animals like leopards or tigers were really frightened by such sounds, or whether that's just a comforting village tale. Some scholars argue that the sound wouldn't have been loud enough to deter a predator unless you bundled several stalks and heated them deliberately. But that's not the point, is it? Whether or not the bamboo saved the boy, what matters is that people believed it did. And belief, in a pre-scientific world, often shaped behavior just as much as evidence. You finish your breakfast and follow the old man down into the paddies. The rice plants are short now, still in their early stages, poking up through the shallow water like little green soldiers. He shows you how they use the terrace system, a marvel of ancient engineering, where every level of the hillside is shaped like a bowl. catching rain, and channeling it gently to the next level. It's peaceful, meditative even. The water moves slow. The sun rises slow. The day itself seems to stretch like a yawn. As you walk along the ridges, you spot more of those carefully placed bamboo stalks, not planted randomly, but positioned in small clusters, angled just so. Some are lashed together with twine made of coconut husk. Others stand alone but seem deliberately selected, older, more yellow, a bit drier. You ask why they do that. "They speak better when they're older," the old man replies with a wink. You realize something. This isn't just passive tradition. It's design. It's a system. These farmers, long before modern acoustics or sensors, had learned how to create natural alert systems using temperature, tension, and the hollow architecture of plants. Imagine that, using heat from the sun, wind direction, and precise positioning of bamboo to make it crack at just the right time, in just the right way, to give off a sequence of audible signals through the night. Not because they were trying to build an alarm system the way we think of it today, but because they were harmonizing with their environment. The world was their instrument, and bamboo was one of its clearest voices. Now here's a quirky little fact. Did you know that in some temples, bamboo was actually soaked in herbs and left to dry in the sun, specifically to enhance the quality of the sound it would make when it cracked? Think of it as the ancient Chinese version of tuning an instrument. Different herbs would dry the bamboo at different rates. Mint for quick bursts, lotus leaf for slower hisses. Monks believed these sounds had ritual importance, used not only to chase away spirits, but also to signal shifts in the moon cycle or to mark moments during long meditations. And yes, some believe the sound helped them fall asleep. The way some people today use rain apps or white noise, certain monks reportedly lay down beside heated bamboo in the evening to listen to the wisdom of the forest. You lie back on the soft earth, staring up at the green canopy above, and you start to understand. There's a rhythm here, a gentle, almost musical heartbeat hidden in the snap and sigh of splitting bamboo. That night, the old man invites you to a gathering. A small one, just 6 neighbors and a pot of sweet rice wine. They sit on mats arranged in a circle, a fire smoldering in the middle. No one talks loudly. They listen. And after a while, the conversation drifts not to politics or taxes or weather, but to bamboo dreams. One man says he heard a bamboo stalk crack last night and dreamed of his grandmother's voice. Another woman insists that when the sound happens just after midnight, it means a traveler is coming. Another swears the cracks correspond with phases of the moon. You sip your wine and smile. No one's trying to convince you. This isn't debate. It's just sharing. Bamboo stories in the dark. And even now, as you lie back and close your eyes again, you start to hear it differently too. Not just a sound, but a signal. Not just a crack, but a kind of language. Ancient, forgotten, perhaps misunderstood, but real nonetheless. A language made not of words, but of heat, tension, timing, and trust. You fall asleep to the whisper of wind and the sudden pop of a bamboo stalk splitting somewhere in the grove beyond the hill. And for the first time in a long while, you sleep deep. The next morning begins the same way, with silence that gradually warms into sound. You stir on your woven mat as the smells of millet porridge, wet clay, and the faint earthy musk of old wood settle in the air like low-hanging clouds. Your ears are still tuned to it. That soft, unpredictable pop in the distance. One crack near the stream, another beyond the paddies. And somehow, they've already become part of your sleep cycle, like lullabies that come late and leave early. You sit cross-legged in the courtyard with the old farmer again, sipping from a tiny bowl of fermented rice water, and you ask him the question that's been in your mind since the first night. Did people always sleep beside exploding bamboo? He chuckles, wipes his nose on his sleeve, and says, not always, but they always slept with something that listened. His phrase stays with you, something that listened. In the modern world, we surround ourselves with lights and locks, alarms that blare, fences that shine, cameras that blink. But here, protection meant something more organic, more silent, more responsive. The bamboo didn't scream when something was wrong. It spoke when no one expected it to, and somehow that was more powerful. You decide to visit the grove. It's not far from the house, just past a series of rice terraces shaped like shallow steps cascading down the valley. Each level of the paddy reflects the sky, like pieces of broken mirror. You step carefully along the edge, mud squishing under your toes, until the path disappears into a thick patch of Philostachys edulis, a towering species of bamboo known today as moso bamboo. Here's your mainstream historical fact for the day. Bamboo has been cultivated in China for over 7,000 years, used in everything from writing to cooking to construction. In some regions, farmers considered it more valuable than grain, because bamboo didn't just feed them, it sheltered them, transported them, and warned them. Some local records from the Song dynasty even mention whispering walls, fences made entirely of bamboo that would signal a stranger's approach, not with sight or scent, but with sound. But that's not what strikes you now, standing alone in this natural cathedral of green. What strikes you is how alive everything feels. Each stalk creaks gently as it sways. Leaves flutter like tiny drums. And then, snap! One lets out a crisp, ringing pop that echoes off the hillside. You flinch, and then you laugh. You're still getting used to that. You run your fingers along the bamboo's smooth skin. It's not as hollow feeling as you imagined. It has weight, a kind of dense silence to it, like a secret you're not quite ready to understand. You look closer and notice something peculiar. Many of the stalks have thin carvings etched into them, not deep enough to damage, but enough to be seen. Spirals, lines, occasionally simple characters. You ask a passing worker what they mean. Some are blessings, he says, brushing away the leaf litter with a bamboo broom. Some are warnings. Some are just practice. He shows you one symbol that means quiet, another that means watchful, and a third that loosely translates to the one who cracks. That's what they call the bamboo here, the one who cracks. Not just a thing, but a being. Not a tool, but a presence, a night companion. Now here's a quirky historical tidbit that rarely makes it into textbooks. In some parts of China, especially during the Tang and early Song dynasties, villagers would name their bamboo groves, almost like they were naming family members. These groves were treated with reverence, spoken to softly during festivals, and even apologized to when cut. One 9th century poem from Sichuan describes a man whispering an apology to a stalk before chopping it for flute wood. "Forgive me, elder reed. I need your voice to find my sorrow." Imagine a world where you name your fence and say sorry to your floorboards. That's the world you're walking through now. You sit on a flat rock in the middle of the grove, soaking it all in. Time stretches, shadows bend. There's no rush here, just the rhythm of wind and wood and waiting. But even among all this beauty, some doubts remain. You wonder, was this really safe? Couldn't the cracks wake children, startle someone into panic, even cause fires? That's where the scholarly debate enters. Some researchers argue that the exploding bamboo tradition has been romanticized, more symbolic than functional. According to this theory, the real reason bamboo was planted around homes wasn't to deter predators or spirits, but simply because it grew fast and offered shade, moisture control, and building material. The sounds were just a bonus, or a myth, layered on afterward. Others disagree. They cite written references from rural gazettes, records of bamboo popping during ceremonies, ritual manuals that describe placement and spacing, and even early proto-firecrackers made from sealed bamboo and pine resin, designed specifically to shout at ghosts. What's more likely? As with many things in history, a little of both. Bamboo probably began as utility. But over generations, as people noticed its quirks, they adapted their beliefs around it. The myth grew with the plant. As you walk back toward the hut, the sun is already starting to dip. You can hear someone pounding rice in the distance, and the soft rustle of drying herbs hanging from the rafters. The village is winding down again. People sweep their thresholds, light lanterns, and settle in for the evening. And again, you notice them. The clusters of fresh bamboo, newly cut and arranged just outside the homes, leaning at soft angles where they'll catch the last warmth of the setting sun. You realize it's a ritual, not sacred, not enforced, but deliberate. A small act of ancient rhythm, passed quietly from generation to generation. You're starting to see it now, not just the history, but the harmony. Bamboo wasn't just a tool, it was a participant in daily life. A partner, a neighbor, a musician with no strings, and a speaker with no words. That night, as the stars emerge above the hills and the frogs resume their song, you tuck yourself beneath your blanket once more. And as you drift into sleep, the crack of bamboo punctuates the silence. Not an interruption, but a gentle reassurance.
The world is listening.
And so you close your eyes, knowing you are not alone. By the time your eyes open again, it's barely light. A few distant birds murmur in the reeds, and the bamboo grove is cloaked in a mist so thick you'd think the mountains were still asleep. You pull your woven shawl tighter around your shoulders and step onto the cool clay floor. No shoes today, just the soft thud of bare feet against earth, the way villagers have walked here for over 1,000 years. You follow the old path past the fields again. This time you take a turn uphill, where the farmers say the elders once lived. The air grows thinner, cooler, and as you climb, more details appear. Old stone platforms overgrown with moss, half-buried ceramic pots, and even the outline of what may have been an ancient shrine, now taken back by trees. It's here, in the shaded fold between two bamboo groves, that you see it. A strange setup. Rows of bamboo stalks arranged like chimes, hanging not from trees but from what looks like a makeshift scaffolding of ancient wood and vine. They're hollow, dry and thin, tuned by nature to create different pitches when they split. A light breeze brushes them and pop, crack, hiss. A soundscape unfolds around you, somewhere between percussion and rainfall. This isn't random. It's designed. You've stumbled into something deeper, a ceremonial bamboo sound garden, once used perhaps for spiritual rituals or community events. Historians still argue over exactly what these bamboo symphonies were for. Some say they were part of ancestor worship, their pops interpreted as answers from the spirit world. Others believe they were seasonal markers, popping more frequently when the air turned moist before monsoon. You kneel beside one of the old logs that props the stalks up and run your fingers along its length. There, faintly etched, are symbols, barely visible now but unmistakably celestial. The sun, a crescent moon, maybe even the characters for wind or harvest. You're not reading history, you're touching it. Let's not forget, this is still a farming society, and every superstition has roots in practical survival. If the bamboo cracks during certain weather patterns, and those patterns often lead to better rice yields, people will make the connection. They may not know the meteorology, but they know the rhythm. And rhythm is everything here. That night, you're invited to something rare. A seasonal feast known as Listening Night. The name alone makes you smile. Around the village square, lanterns flicker like lazy fireflies. People bring bowls of steamed greens, pickled lotus, fried fish, and rice dumplings wrapped in banana leaves. But the focus isn't food. It's silence. At the center of the gathering, a circle of fresh-cut bamboo stalks, propped up like musical instruments. A fire is lit nearby, not close enough to burn, just enough to warm. And then they wait. The fire crackles. Time passes. Then, pop. One stalk sings out. Crack. Another follows. The group murmurs approval, like they're listening to a jazz solo. Some close their eyes. Others smile faintly, like remembering an old inside joke. Each sound is treated like a guest. Here's a fun little fringe fact. Some rural texts from the Ming Dynasty describe entire nights dedicated to what they called bamboo conversation. The elders would interpret which direction the sound came from, how high or low it popped, whether it cracked with a hiss or a bang. It was part weather forecast, part fortune-telling, part entertainment. Think of it as nature's version of a gossip circle, except no one speaks, and the main storyteller is a plant. You sit cross-legged on the earth, watching the stalks as they darken in the fire's glow. The villagers don't flinch when the bamboo splits. They nod, they murmur. Some chuckle. It's like jazz in a language no one really understands, but everyone feels. You begin to feel it too. Not fear, not confusion, but rhythm, anticipation. The waiting between cracks is as powerful as the sound itself. And maybe that's the secret. In a world with no clocks, this was how people marked time. Not with minutes and seconds, but with sounds and seasons. The bamboo popped more often during hot nights, less so in the cold. More after rain, less during drought. Over generations, villagers tuned their senses to it like we do to the ticking of a wall clock. One elder sitting beside you says softly, "The bamboo teaches you to listen." You ask him, "To what?" He shrugs. "To everything." And it makes sense, doesn't it? In this corner of the world, listening is survival. You listen for the change in frog song before a flood. You listen to how your ox breathes when it's sick. You listen to the way your child coughs in the night and know if it's a fever or just a chill. And here, you listen to the bamboo to know if the air is too dry, if spirits are near, if someone, something is moving where it shouldn't be. You glance around the circle. No one is restless. No one is looking at a device or itching to speak. They're just waiting. Eyes half-lidded, ears open. You lie back and stare at the stars, letting the soft popping guide your breath. In, out, crack, pause, in again.
And then it hits you. This is what sleep used to sound like.
Not complete silence, not artificial noise, but nature, moving in slow rhythms. A night that tells you what it knows, one sound at a time. So you let go. And as the breeze carries another burst of bamboo laughter into the night, you sink into sleep like a stone into water, weightless, deep, and entirely at peace. You awaken with the faintest trace of smoke in your nostrils, not the choking kind, but the gentle, woody scent of a long-burning fire. It clings to the morning air like a memory, mingled with the crisp wetness of mist that still hasn't lifted from the valley floor. The village, wrapped in early silence, stirs softly. A door creaks open, a ladle clinks against a clay pot. Somewhere a child giggles at something unseen. You pull yourself up slowly, your limbs heavy from the depth of last night's sleep. And again, the thought floats through your mind. This is how sleep was meant to be. Not stolen between screens and stress, but earned, like a reward after a day of deliberate rhythm and watchful stillness. The old farmer waves you over again. He's in the same spot as yesterday, standing knee-deep in the irrigation canal. But today, something's different. Laid across his lap is a curved bamboo tool, worn smooth by years of handling. It's not for farming, he tells you. It's for measuring wind. You raise an eyebrow. He demonstrates. One end of the tool is narrow and hollow. The other is weighted with a carved gourd. As the wind moves through the grove, the bamboo hums gently. Not a whistle, not a shriek, a whisper, somewhere between a sigh and a breath. The villagers use this sound to predict how the bamboo will react that night. Too dry, and the stalks may explode suddenly. Too damp, and they'll stay silent. It's a form of acoustic forecasting, and it's been in use, according to some oral traditions, since the Han Dynasty. Historians still argue whether this device was widespread or unique to specific regions. But one thing is clear. People here learn to read the world through sound, and not just the bamboo. As you walk further into the valley, guided by a young boy who insists he knows a shortcut, you begin to notice how sound is woven into everything. The way the water sluices through stone channels without splashing. The layered buzzing of insects, louder in the shaded patches, softer in the windier fields. Even the rice paddies themselves seem to hum faintly. The combination of sunlight and water creating a kind of subterranean warmth that feels alive. You pass a hut where two women are weaving baskets from dried bamboo strips. They don't look up, but you hear them humming softly in harmony with the tapping of their knives. Each rhythm is deliberate, repetitive, designed to keep their hands steady. This too is sleep-inducing work, not because it's boring, but because it's peaceful, predictable, human in scale and motion. And here's your quirky tidbit of the day. In some ancient Chinese provinces, night watchmen used to walk the village with two pieces of bamboo, striking them together every hour to mark time. But they wouldn't just bang them together randomly. They had specific patterns, each unique to the time of night. One crack meant the first hour after sundown. Two slow ones and a quick snap meant the hour just before dawn. Villagers lying half asleep could tell the time with their eyes closed, purely by rhythm.
You wonder how many of those patterns are lost now.
The boy leads you to a small sunken grove, a place the locals call the cradle. It's where the oldest bamboo grows, protected from harvest. Some of these stalks, he says, are over 100 years old. Their skins are dark and spotted, and many lean at strange angles, like arthritic elders holding each other up. He asks if you want to sit. You nod. And so, you sit there. Just you, the boy, and a circle of ancient bamboo, letting the sounds of the world move around you. A frog croaks somewhere beneath a leaf. A breeze shifts the leaves with a sound like 1,000 paper fans. And then, pop. One of the oldest stalks lets out a crack so soft, it sounds like a knuckle cracking in another room. The boy turns to you and whispers, "That one means the weather's changing." You nod, even though you have no way of knowing. You nod because, in that moment, you believe him. Not because of science, but because of how certain he sounds, how in tune he is with the world around him. You lie back again and stare up through the canopy, your body framed in shadow and dappled light. The sounds above you form an orchestra, wind through gaps, leaves whispering gossip, insects playing the high notes, and bamboo occasionally cutting through with its percussive voice. And in that slow rhythm, your thoughts begin to drift, not backward or forward, but sideways. You wonder how many other societies listened this closely, how many languages of sound have been forgotten, how many elders across the world sat beside crackling wood and told their grandchildren what the forest was saying. And then, out of nowhere, the boy says, "My grandmother used to say bamboo is the only plant that never stops listening. Even when it cracks, it's just answering something it already heard." You don't ask what that means. You don't need to. Because in that moment, the air itself seems to nod in agreement. You stay in the cradle until the shadows grow long and the bamboo sways like dancers bowing to an invisible rhythm. And when you finally rise, brush off your hands, and follow the boy back down the hill, you carry more than memory. You carry the rhythm of 1,000 nights. By now, you no longer need the rooster to wake you. Your body has synced itself to the pulse of this place, the slow inhaling and exhaling of dawn and dusk, the warm lull of afternoon haze, the crisp hush of pre-midnight, broken only by the distant crack of bamboo that sounds less like danger and more like punctuation at the end of a dream. Today, the old farmer greets you not with rice water, but with a sly smile and a shallow basket of mud. Gloppy, gray, sticky mud. You blink. "Massage?" He chuckles. "No, architecture." You squint down at the basket. There's something odd about it. Not just the color, but the texture. Bits of straw, slivers of charred wood, maybe even bamboo ash. He leads you to the edge of a small open building with a conical thatched roof and walls that look like pressed earth. But as you look closer, you notice that between every layer, the wall has thin strips of horizontal bamboo running like rib bones. He gestures to the basket and then to the wall. Ah, wattle and daub, you realize. An ancient construction method still in use, still effective, still surprisingly elegant. Mainstream historical fact time. Across East and Southeast Asia, including regions under Khmer influence, bamboo was used as a primary structural element for homes, temples, and granaries. It was fast-growing, flexible, and, when properly treated, nearly as strong as steel. In fact, in many Khmer rural areas, entire floating villages were built using bamboo as the buoyant base. But it wasn't just structure. Bamboo was integration. Homes weren't built with bamboo. They were woven with it, like baskets large enough for a family to live inside. And here's your quirky detail. Bamboo wasn't only for the walls. In some rare village practices recorded near the Tonle Sap Lake region, thin slices of bamboo were placed under the bedding mats, not for support, but because the slight snap or flex of bamboo would signal if someone rolled over, snored too loudly, or tried to sneak away. The home itself was alive, listening, like everything else. You run your hand along one of the older beams. It's warm from the sun and worn smooth by countless hands. A fine crack runs through the surface, but the structure holds firm. And it's quiet now. No pop, no crack, just waiting. Tonight, the farmer tells you, we sleep by the temple. The temple. It takes half the day to get there. Not because it's far, but because the path winds like a lazy river. Up terraces, past banana groves, through soft clusters of sugar palms swaying with the sound of slow applause. The further you go, the older the land feels. You begin to notice carvings in the rock, small niches in the hillside where offerings were once placed. Bamboo groves arranged in geometric rows that feel more intentional than anything you've seen yet. And finally, you arrive. At first, you don't even see it. The temple is so overgrown, so married to the forest. It looks like the forest grew the temple itself. Roots pour over sandstone walls like candle wax. Vines curl around fallen pillars. And the bamboo? It arches over the ruins like a living roof, letting sunlight dapple through in pools of soft gold. You're told this was once a Khmer agricultural shrine, a place where harvests were blessed and rain prayed for. The stone still bears faint bas reliefs, a woman with lotus petals in her hair, a water buffalo mid-step, a stalk of rice, a stalk of bamboo, and, most curious of all, a cluster of exploding bamboo tied with ribbon. You blink. Exploding bamboo. Not just practical, not just mystical, but sacred. Historians still debate whether the Khmer truly revered bamboo as divine, or whether these carvings are symbolic, representing protection, fertility, or simply nature's cooperation with man. One theory suggests the cracks of bamboo were likened to celestial language, a divine sound meant to bridge human and spiritual realms. Another proposes that bamboo was revered for its regenerative power, returning even after being cut down. You run your fingers across the carving, careful not to press too hard. The stone is soft, worn by centuries of weather. But you swear, the etched explosion still seems to pulse with energy. That night, you lay your mat beneath a half-fallen archway. The bamboo rustles above, forming a lullaby with the crickets and frogs. Someone from the village lights a torch and places it in a carved niche, casting dancing shadows across the old stone. For a moment, the temple doesn't feel abandoned. It feels asleep, like the rest of the land. And then it happens again. Crack. Somewhere deep in the grove behind you, bamboo splits. A single dry, ringing note that echoes through stone like a bell. You smile. And that's when the old farmer leans over and says, "You're ready to meet the spirit." Your eyes widen. Not a ghost, he assures you, chuckling. The guardian of the grove. Every temple has one. Now, don't worry. This isn't a horror story. This is bedtime. No jump scares here, just a tradition. Because here's the truth. Many Khmer villages believe each bamboo grove has a guardian spirit, not to scare people, but to protect them. Children leave rice at the edge of the grove. Women whisper thanks before harvest. And every now and then, someone claims to hear the grove humming back. You drift to sleep with this idea floating in your mind. A guardian who speaks through wood, who never moves but always hears. A protector not of gold, not of bloodlines, but of rhythm. And as the bamboo pops once more in the distance, softer this time, more like a sigh, you feel yourself melt into the night, like ink into parchment.
The spirit is watching, not with eyes,
but with ears made of green and gold. You wake before the sun crests the trees, your body blanketed in that familiar hush that only comes when the world is holding its breath. No footsteps, no bird calls yet, only the distant rustle of bamboo leaves brushing against each other like silk sleeves in the dark. You sit up slowly, not wanting to disturb the rhythm. The temple's stone beneath you is surprisingly warm, as if the ground itself never quite cools here, holding the memory of sun the way old songs hold feeling. You roll your shoulders, stretch your arms, and turn toward the bamboo grove where the guardian supposedly lives. It's quieter than usual, and that's when you notice the circle. Right outside the grove's edge, laid in a perfect ring, are small pebbles, each one charred black on one side. They weren't there last night. Or were they? You're not sure. But their shape is too perfect to be accidental. The old farmer appears beside you like a ghost of habit, carrying two items: a bundle of dried bamboo segments tied with red thread, and a small clay bowl of rice soaked in coconut milk. He places both on the ground just outside the circle and murmurs something under his breath. You don't ask him to repeat it. Some things aren't meant to be heard twice. You follow him into the grove, stepping carefully around the ring, and your feet land on the damp earth with the gentleness of someone walking through a dream. You walk single file, surrounded on all sides by bamboo that now seems impossibly tall, arching, towering, leaning toward one another in conference. This grove is different from the others. The stalks here aren't just tall, they're ancient, their skin mottled and etched with natural scars. Some lean sideways, not from wind, but from the weight of memory. A few are split open from past explosions, yet still standing, their hollow bodies now nests for birds or homes for curious lizards. The old farmer stops at the center of the grove and points to a flat stone platform, not carved like the temple's altar, but smoothed by years of barefoot prayers. He sits cross-legged, lays the bamboo bundle beside him, and gestures for you to do the same. You sit. For a moment, nothing happens. Then, from somewhere deep in the grove, crack. But this time, it's followed by another. And then a flutter, like dry fingers brushing parchment. The sounds aren't violent. They're measured, like someone knocking gently before entering a room. This, the old man explains, is how the guardian makes introductions. You've now entered the oldest part of the forest, and here the rules are different. You don't talk. You don't record. You don't ask for anything. You just listen. And as you listen, he begins to speak. Not loudly, not formally, just softly, like someone telling a bedtime story he's told 1,000 times. He tells you of the old times, when the Khmer Empire stretched across Southeast Asia like a giant's robe, and yet even then, the emperors feared the spirits of the land more than they feared rival kings. He tells you of the royal bamboo harvest, done only once every 3 years, and only under the supervision of monks who slept beside the grove for weeks in silence to seek permission from its guardian. He tells you that the sound of bamboo cracking at the wrong time was once seen as an omen, not of death, but of imbalance. It meant something was off, the air too dry, the people too proud, the offering forgotten. Historians still debate whether these rituals were widespread or practiced only by a few deeply spiritual enclaves. Some argue they were symbolic, others that they were rooted in early meteorological science. But the villagers here, they don't debate. They remember. The old man lifts the bundle of bamboo and unties it. Inside are small tubes, each sealed with wax. He breaks one open, and inside is something unexpected. Charcoal dust, mixed with crushed herbs. He dips a finger in and smears a thin black line across his forehead. Then he hands it to you. The paste smells like smoke and mint, and when you press it against your skin, it tingles faintly. "This is so the grove knows you're here," he whispers, "knows you're listening." He places another bamboo tube at the foot of a particularly large stalk, then lights incense. The smoke curls up in tight spirals, then twists sideways as if nudged by invisible hands. And here comes your quirky fact. In some Khmer ghost rituals, bamboo smoke was thought to carry prayers more effectively than words. Why? Because the popping of bamboo was considered honest. It could not lie. So mixing smoke and crackling wood was thought to send messages straight to the spirit realm, unfiltered, unedited. You sit silently, letting the smoke rise, the incense melt, and the popping begin again. This time, it's musical. 3 light cracks, a pause, then 2 more. One high-pitched, like a bird. One low, like a drum. The old man taps the ground in rhythm, and you join him, palms light against the earth. He doesn't smile. He doesn't explain. Because here in the grove, you don't perform the ritual. You become it. And maybe, in the hush between the cracks, between the smoke, between your breath and the swaying stalks, you feel something more than sleep coming on. You feel stillness. The kind you don't get from naps or vacations. The kind that settles in your bones and says, you don't have to hurry anymore. You close your eyes. The ground is soft beneath you. The bamboo above watches. And in that sacred silence, you finally understand what the guardian of the grove has been trying to say. You're welcome. You wake up slower than usual this time. The light filtering through the bamboo is pale, almost silver. Morning has arrived gently, without fanfare, as if the entire forest agreed not to wake you too fast. The smoke from last night's incense still lingers in the air, delicate and woodsy, curling through the leaves like the tail of a sleeping dragon. You sit up and stretch, your back pressing into the worn stone of the old platform, and for a brief moment, you forget where you are. Not because the grove is unfamiliar, but because it now feels more like home than anything else you remember. The old farmer is already up, his hands deep in a clay pot, mixing something that smells like warm molasses and toasted sesame. When he sees you, he gives you a nod, the kind of nod that says you made it through the night. Now let's do something useful with it. Today, he says, is about movement. Not just any movement, bamboo farming movement. You trail after him through the grove and into a clearing where several younger villagers are already at work. But they're not harvesting rice today. They're doing something much more precise. They're training bamboo. Yes, training it. Like one might train a bonsai tree or a wayward dog. Long stalks are being tied gently to wooden stakes with hand-twisted banana fiber cord, while others are being carefully bent using water weights made from clay jars. You watch as one boy slowly rotates a stalk in his hand, listening to it creak as it flexes. He seems to know exactly how far to push without causing a split. And here comes your mainstream historical fact. In many early Asian agricultural systems, bamboo wasn't just grown, it was engineered. Khmer farmers were known to guide bamboo stalks into arcs and frames that would later become tools, scaffolds, or even water wheels without needing nails or joins. It was farming and carpentry at once. Now, here's the quirky twist. There's an old Khmer saying that goes, "If you force bamboo, it will scream." Not break, scream. Because they believed that bamboo split not just from pressure, but from insult. That pushing it too hard or too fast disrespected the natural balance between use and reverence. Which brings you to the fascinating little debate. Historians still argue whether bamboo's importance in Khmer daily life was primarily practical or spiritual. Some claim it was simply a resource, useful and abundant. Others believe it was something closer to a cultural philosophy, woven into everything from architecture to bedtime rituals, from family roles to the lunar calendar. Watching the villagers now, you can see both sides. A group of older women is sitting under the shade, weaving bamboo fish traps that look like enormous conical spirals. They speak softly, their hands moving in practiced rhythm, their fingers nimble despite the years. Each twist, each fold, each tie is done without measuring tools. Everything is judged by feel. You sit beside one of them, and she lets you hold a half-finished trap. It's lighter than it looks, almost weightless, and it smells faintly sweet, like sun-baked grass. She points to a knot near the top and says something that translates roughly to, "That's the heart. Never twist the heart too tight." You smile, unsure whether she means the trap or you. The traps aren't just for fishing, she explains. Some are used for ritual offerings, filled with rice and fruit and floated down streams to thank the water spirits. Others are hung above doors, painted with turmeric, to ward off bad dreams. One woman tells you about the Festival of Bamboo Shadows, a long-forgotten local celebration that once marked the start of the rainy season. On that day, villagers would build a massive bamboo archway near the riverbank, decorated with rice husks, jasmine, and palm leaves. Children would run through the arches laughing, and the elders would sit nearby, listening for the sound of the first thunder crack, seen as the gods answering back. You close your eyes for a moment and try to imagine it. The scent of wet earth, laughter echoing off the hills, bamboo snapping softly in the background like a divine drumbeat. You open your eyes again. The boy from the previous night is standing nearby, holding something out to you. A bamboo flute. It's short and worn smooth, the color of old honey, with finger holes that don't seem evenly spaced. He gestures for you to try it. You raise it to your lips and blow. The sound is breathy, trembling, as though the bamboo is unsure whether it wants to sing. But then, on your third try, a low, clear note floats out, soft, like the edge of a dream, rising up into the heat of midday. The villagers nod approvingly. The flute was made from a stalk that cracked at dusk. They say instruments born from natural splitting have a better voice, because they've already spoken once. You sit with the boy, taking turns playing gentle, wobbly melodies as the others work around you. Nobody's in a rush. Nobody's checking the time.
And perhaps the strangest thing of all?
You don't want to check either, because in this world of shifting shadows, echoing cracks and bamboo that seems to bend without breaking. Time no longer feels like something chasing you. It feels like something you finally caught up to. The next morning, you're not sure if you're waking up from sleep or from a spell. The bamboo shadows flicker gently across your face, and for a moment it feels like you've fallen into the rhythm of something older than sleep, older than dreams. The rhythm of the land itself. A rhythm whispered in the pop of bamboo, in the shuffle of bare feet across packed earth, and in the gentle rustle of leaves overhead, like pages turning in a forgotten book. The old farmer greets you with a slight bow. Today, he says, you'll learn how water moves when people don't force it. You follow him away from the village proper, further than you've gone before, past carved stone wells and leaning banana trees, until the land begins to sink ever so slightly. The air grows thicker. You start to notice more water underfoot. Little puddles, trickling paths, then wider flats where reeds sway like dancers. And then, finally, you see it. A vast, shallow reservoir, stretching as far as the eye can see, broken up by narrow earthen ridges and groves of, you guessed it, bamboo. But this isn't a pond. This is something far more intentional. This is a beret, a Khmer water reservoir that's not just storage, but strategy. Mainstream historical fact incoming. The Khmer Empire was one of the most advanced hydraulic civilizations of its time. They didn't just build cities. They engineered entire landscapes. Vast reservoirs like the East and West Berets near Angkor were the size of small lakes, used to store monsoon water and regulate rice irrigation year-round. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. The reservoirs didn't work alone. They were connected by a network of canals, embankments, and bamboo sluices, creating a kind of water web that pulsed and flexed depending on the season. You walk alongside one such canal now, narrow, lined with sun-baked stones and flanked by thick clusters of bamboo water gates. The old farmer stops beside one and gestures for you to look closer. At first, it seems simple. Just 3 upright bamboo poles tied together with strips of dried palm fiber. But when he pulls one gently aside, the water begins to trickle into a smaller channel, curving toward a rice field. He lets go, and the pole slides back, stopping the flow. No gears, no metal, just balance. And now, for the quirky twist. In some Khmer farming villages, the position of the bamboo water gates was determined by the position of the stars, particularly the Pleiades cluster, which signaled seasonal changes. Farmers would set the gates by moonlight, aligning earthly water with the heavens above. You lean in closer, studying the water's movement, and realize something odd. Despite the terrain, nothing floods, nothing overflows. Every drop seems accounted for, guided, coaxed, rather than commanded. You think about the way modern cities handle water, with concrete, force, and sometimes panic. Here, it's more like a conversation. The old farmer hands you a long bamboo pole, curved slightly at one end like a shepherd's crook. "Measure," he says. You step carefully onto the narrow dikes between fields, using the pole to test depth. At each corner, you see small bamboo markers, one tied with red cloth, another with a bit of carved bone, another with a bell. Yes, a tiny bell. When you nudge that marker, it rings faintly, and a child working nearby looks up and waves. Communication, the farmer grins. And here comes the scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the Khmer irrigation systems were centrally managed by imperial engineers or handled locally by farming communities. Some point to inscriptions detailing royal orders. Others believe it was far more decentralized, passed down orally through generations. Looking at this quiet field, with its elegant water gates and bamboo signal bells, you're tempted to believe in the bottom-up genius. You continue your walk along the fields, observing the strange intimacy the farmers have with water. They don't just grow rice in it. They bathe in it, pray near it, tell stories to it. One woman sitting by a canal gently cups a handful, whispers into it, and releases it again. "It carries the wish," she tells you in soft Khmer. You nod, because you understand now. Water doesn't just feed the plants, it feeds the stories. Later, back at the village, you notice something new. An old bamboo raft, half submerged at the pond's edge. You ask about it, and the children eagerly drag it to shore. It's patched and fraying, but sturdy. They hop on, grab bamboo poles, and paddle out slowly across the reservoir, giggling the whole time. You follow with the farmer, gliding silently across the mirrored water. Midway across, the wind shifts, and suddenly, the bamboo surrounding the reservoir begins to sway and creak. And then, yes, you guessed it. Pop, crack, snap, 3 bursts in quick succession, one to the left, one behind you, one dead ahead. The old man grins. "The bamboo guards the water," he says.
And somehow, you believe him.
You close your eyes on the raft, letting the world tilt gently beneath you, rocked by the breeze, the water, the steady rhythm of this place where nothing is forced and everything is guided. By now, your sense of time has softened into something less like a clock and more like a tide, rising and falling gently, never in a hurry. You no longer reach for your phone. You no longer wonder what hour it is. Here in the land of bamboo, water, and whispering trees, time doesn't tell you what to do. It just joins you. The old farmer is waiting again. How does he always know when you're ready? Today, he carries something different. Not tools, not rice, but a scroll, rolled tight, bound with string, sealed with a thumbprint of red wax. It looks far too delicate to be farm-related. You follow him, curiosity trailing like smoke behind you. He leads you to a place you haven't seen before, an open-air pavilion shaded by carved wooden beams, where an elder sits cross-legged on a woven mat. She doesn't look surprised to see you. In fact, she nods at the farmer, gestures toward you, and opens her hands to accept the scroll. He places it gently in her palms, bows, and steps away. You sit beside her, legs folded politely, and wait. She unties the scroll slowly, very slowly, in that way only people who've seen 100 rainy seasons can do, and begins to read aloud in soft Khmer. You don't understand the words, but the rhythm, the pauses, the gentle lift of her voice as it curls around each line, it's enough. You're not listening for meaning. You're listening for memory. Later, the farmer explains. It's a rice lineage poem, passed down for centuries, naming each year's harvest, the type of rice grown, the rains that fell, the pest that came, the solution used, the dreams people had while the rice grew. Yes, dreams. Because rice isn't just a crop, he says. It's a diary. And here's your mainstream fact. Khmer rice culture isn't just about food. It's about identity. Specific varieties were grown for specific purposes. Some for temple offerings, others for medicinal broths, others still for weddings or funerals. The most sacred strain, known simply as moon rice, was harvested only during the full moon of the cold season and stored in special bamboo baskets painted with ash. You're shown one such basket. It's not large. No jewels. No gold. Just woven bamboo, etched with tiny glyphs that almost look like music notes. It smells faintly of earth, memory, and, strangely, lavender. And now for your quirky tidbit. In some remote villages, pregnant women were encouraged to sleep near these baskets, believing that the spirit of the rice would calm the baby in the womb. They even whispered stories to it at night, much like you're being told now. As the elder continues reading from the scroll, you catch the name of a king, Jayavarman VII, the builder of Angkor Thom. The farmer leans over and whispers that during his reign, rice yields were recorded not just in weight, but in song. Each village composed a tune for their harvest, and the king's archivists wrote them down as both grain counts and melodies. Historians still argue whether this was symbolic or literal. Some believe these songs were simply metaphors. Others claim to have found fragments of notation in temple walls, evidence perhaps that the Khmer didn't just count rice. They composed with it. You're handed a tiny wooden instrument, a bamboo mouth harp, and shown how to pluck it gently. The sound is faint, insect-like, a vibration more than a note, but the elder smiles approvingly and points to a line on the scroll. "Same tone?" she says. You stare at the paper, trying to match the pulse of the symbols to the pulse of the note in your mouth, and for a moment, something clicks. You're not reading history. You're inhabiting it. That night, the village gathers near a small pond shrine, its surface dotted with floating lotus candles. Children race around giggling, their laughter bouncing off the water. The women lay out offerings, bowls of sticky rice, banana slices, and what appears to be roasted bamboo shoots stuffed with coconut and sesame. The farmer hands you one. "You've earned dessert," he says. It's sweet, earthy, and smoky, the kind of taste that doesn't just please the tongue, but tugs on something deep inside your chest. You chew slowly, letting the flavor unfold like a soft memory. As the sun sets, the elder begins to sing. It's the same rhythm from earlier, but now the whole village hums along. No words for you to follow, just tones, pulses, and pauses. You don't need translation. You close your eyes and hum too. And in that moment, surrounded by the warm evening air, the scent of bamboo smoke, and the chorus of voices in tune with the very field they till, you feel something shift inside you. It's not that you understand Khmer history now. It's that you belong to it, even if just for tonight. Section 11. The next day begins with an odd request. The old farmer wakes you just after dawn, not with his usual polite cough or quiet footfall, but by tapping your forehead with a stalk of bamboo. Not hard, just enough to get your attention. You open one eye and groan. "You're ready now," he says, grinning. "Ready for what?" you ask, your voice still thick with sleep. "To sink." Not metaphorically. He takes you down a narrow footpath past the rice terraces, over a shallow stream where stepping stones wobble underfoot, and into a sunken clearing, almost like a natural amphitheater carved out of the land itself. The walls are draped with vines, and the ground underfoot feels soft, spongy, suspiciously mud-like. You're about to say something when you see the other farmers already standing knee-deep in the sludge, grinning like children about to splash someone. Except they're holding tools, bamboo spades and scoops that look more like large spoons than anything you've seen in a hardware store. And this is where the magic starts. Today, you'll learn how the Khmer didn't grow rice the way we assume. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Khmer farmers engineered floating rice platforms, raised beds or rafts, often stabilized with bamboo, that allowed them to grow rice in flood-prone regions without having to slog through waist-deep muck every day. Think of it as hydroponics' ancient cousin, soil held in place by woven mats, propped up on bamboo pontoons, allowing water to seep up into the roots while the farmer stays mostly dry above. Mostly. The farmers guide you to one such structure, not a full raft, but a half-submerged patch supported by bamboo scaffolding. It bends slightly when you step onto it, like a trampoline made of earth, grass, and hope. You're handed a bundle of seedlings. They're bright green, slightly muddy, and bound with a twist of palm fiber. You're shown how to press them gently into the mat, not too deep, not too shallow, while keeping your weight centered. It's like gardening while surfing. You ask how they learned to do this. One of the younger farmers shrugs. From our grandmothers and the frogs. You think he's joking, but then he points out a cluster of frogs nearby, each perched on a bamboo stalk at just the right water height. If the frogs stay, the platform will hold. If they jump off, too wet. And here's your quirky tidbit. In some Khmer farming regions, frogs were considered natural water level indicators. Entire planting cycles were adjusted based on whether frogs nested high, low, or vanished entirely. You crouch lower, eyeing the frogs as they blink lazily back at you and realize they do look like tiny weather prophets. Nearby, a young woman teaches you how to tie floating boundaries, using banana fiber ropes stretched between vertical bamboo poles to section off patches of floating rice beds. This creates microclimates, traps nutrients, and keeps greedy fish out. She laughs when you struggle with the knots. The rice won't grow faster just because you're panicking, she says. Touché. As you adjust to the gentle bob of the platform under your feet, you begin to notice just how elegant the system is. Each piece, the floating mat, the bamboo stabilizers, the fiber ropes, the water itself, is in quiet conversation with the others. Nothing dominates. Everything supports. And that brings us to your scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether these floating platforms were a widespread innovation across the Khmer Empire or a regional adaptation used only in flood-prone pockets. Some scholars point to satellite imagery of ancient canal networks that hint at wide usage. Others insist the method was local knowledge, passed down quietly like a family recipe. Looking at the farmers now, moving in silent choreography, you begin to wonder how many inventions never made it into textbooks because they were simply too humble to brag about. You spend hours planting, scooping, adjusting ropes, chasing off the occasional fish who thinks your toes are snacks. And eventually, covered in sweat, flecks of mud, and surprisingly serene, you lie back on the edge of the bamboo frame and just float. The platform rocks gently beneath you. Overhead, a formation of birds passes in slow motion. One of the frogs lets out a lazy croak beside your ear, as if to say, "Good job for not falling in." You laugh, not loudly, just enough to let the breeze carry it across the water. As the day fades, the farmer hands you a drink, a cup made from hollowed bamboo, filled with a cool, milky liquid. It tastes like sweet rice and herbs, with a hint of something floral. He tells you it's called tuk kroyung, an herbal rice water, fermented just long enough to cool the body after work. It's not alcoholic, but it does make your limbs feel looser, your breath slower, your eyelids heavier. You sit together on the edge of the field, watching the last rays of sunlight scatter across the floating gardens. Somewhere in the distance, you hear that now familiar crackle, bamboo bursting in the heat. And you smile. Because here, even explosions are part of the lullaby. The night falls warm and humming. Crickets chirp in lazy harmony with the low rattle of frogs, while a slow breeze whispers through the palms. The stars begin to crowd the sky like old villagers leaning in to hear a good story, and you, still smelling faintly of mud and sweet rice water, begin to understand why no one here rushes to finish anything. Everything in this place is unfinished on purpose. Tonight, the farmer doesn't lead you toward the fields or the canals. Instead, he motions toward a small side path, half covered in moss and half eaten by time. You duck under drooping vines and follow him into a clearing filled with stone faces. Literal ones, ancient, lichen-streaked statues, some crumbled, some whole, sit half submerged in lotus ponds and nestled under banyan roots. All of them look serene. Some have faint smiles. One has a nose completely swallowed by ivy. You ask where you are. Old Field Temple, the farmer replies, brushing moss off a stone that might once have been a dancing Shiva or a praying Buddha. It's hard to tell. These statues didn't watch battles, they watched harvests. Here comes your mainstream historical fact. Though the grand temples of Angkor Wat and Bayon dominate history books, hundreds of smaller agrarian shrines dotted the empire. These were dedicated not to kings, but to rain gods, rice spirits, ancestor farmers. They weren't made for conquest. They were made for continuity. You kneel beside one statue, running your hand over its time-smoothed cheek, and realize this deity isn't standing on a lotus or riding a lion. He's cradling a rice stalk. The message is clear. This isn't a god of war. This is a god of yield. And now for your quirky tidbit. In some parts of the Khmer countryside, these old field gods were fed by moonlight rituals involving, wait for it, bamboo xylophones. Villagers believed that by playing a soothing melody on instruments carved from freshly cut bamboo, they could cool the ears of the spirits, ensuring gentle rain and pest-free crops. One particularly delicate statue, half lost to a creeping fig tree, has two hands raised, not in prayer, but cupped slightly apart, like a musician about to play air xylophone. You chuckle. Even the statues are musical here. The farmer hands you a bundle of small bamboo tubes, each one a different length. A few of the village children arrive, dragging a battered frame that looks suspiciously like the bones of an old xylophone. Together, you begin to rebuild it, slotting the tubes in, tying them with fraying strips of rattan. Play slow, one child says. You're not making noise, you're making space. You tap out a simple rhythm, low, low, high, low, pause. The sound rings out hollow and warm, floating above the moss and statues like steam from a morning rice pot. In the stillness that follows, one elder begins to hum. No one moves. No one speaks. The melody rises gently, carrying something weightier than a tune, memory. And now comes the scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether these musical rituals were purely symbolic or whether they formed part of a complex agrarian calendar that combined astronomy, sound, and seasonal changes. Some records describe ceremonies lasting 3 nights. Others mention that the xylophones were tuned to match the song of frogs during monsoon buildup. You look at the instruments, you look at the frogs, you start to see the pattern. As the night deepens, villagers begin laying offerings at the feet of the statues, bundles of young rice, stalks of lemongrass, hand-woven fish traps, even a carved bamboo pipe. Each item isn't grand, but each is used, loved, real. And it strikes you, this isn't a museum. This is a conversation with the past, spoken in the language of tools, music, and food. One elderly woman touches the base of a statue and tells you, through a translator, that when she was a child, her grandmother would bring her here to learn the stories of each rice god. Not just names and symbols, but what kind of rice they liked best. If you gave sticky rice to the sour-faced one, she says, he'd make your dreams smell like onions. You laugh, but she doesn't. You'd wake up crying. Don't ask me how I know. You light a candle, not because you believe in field spirits necessarily, but because something about the place demands softness. You place it near the statue with the missing nose and smile as the light dances across the water. It's quiet again, so quiet that you notice your own breath, a little slower, a little deeper. You close your eyes, and in the black behind your lids, the sounds take over. Bamboo chimes in the breeze, frogs in syncopated croaks, a faint pop from somewhere in the woods, another bamboo explosion, like an echo of all those harvest songs once carried in this very space. And then someone whispers nearby, just loud enough for you to catch. The gods only listen when you don't try too hard. You wake up with bamboo leaves stuck in your hair and the faint smell of sweet smoke still clinging to your clothes. No one wakes you this time. The farmer is nowhere in sight. Instead, a child, barefoot, barely waist high, grabs your wrist and pulls. No talking, she says, finger to lips. You stumble after her, still half asleep through the narrow footpaths, past that same mossy clearing of statues, deeper than you've gone before. The sounds of the village fall away. No chatter, no chimes, just the hush of leaves brushing against each other, and the faint snap of twigs beneath your feet. You arrive at a circle of stones. At first it seems like just another ancient ruin, half swallowed by vines, partly flattened by centuries of monsoon rain. But something about it feels different. The stones are smaller, rounder, arranged not for grandeur, but for gathering. And sitting right in the middle, grinning ear to ear, is the old farmer, this time not with tools or scrolls, but with a cooking pot. Time to eat the story, he says. You're confused, naturally. But as he begins setting out ingredients, bamboo tubes, banana leaves, sprigs of herbs, and bundles of what look like forest mushrooms, you realize you're going to learn history through flavor. Mainstream historical fact coming up. The Khmer people didn't just grow rice innovatively. They also cooked it in remarkably sustainable ways. One of their oldest techniques involves bamboo cooking, stuffing rice, herbs, fish, and coconut into a section of green bamboo and slow cooking it over embers until the flavors melt together. It's called crackle, a dish still eaten today in rural Cambodia. And it's not just food, it's a time capsule. The farmer hands you a bundle of sticky rice mixed with black beans and shredded coconut, all packed inside a bamboo chute sealed with a banana leaf. He gestures for you to place it over the fire. The flames lick the sides of the bamboo. It doesn't burn. Instead, it sings. The steam builds inside, and eventually, a soft pop echoes out, the bamboo's version of applause. And here comes the quirky detail. In older traditions, the first bamboo crack during cooking was seen as a message from the ancestors. A good pop meant your recipe was accepted. No pop? Start over. No pressure. You sit by the fire, stomach rumbling, watching the tubes slowly brown. The child who brought you here carefully peels a banana with more reverence than you've ever seen applied to fruit and lays the peels across a nearby rock. For the spirits, she whispers. Once the tubes are done, the farmer shows you how to split them open. You peel back the charred outer layer to reveal steaming rice, soaked in coconut milk, fragrant with lemongrass and wild ginger. The taste? Like a dream of home you didn't know you had. Now, the farmer says, we add the past. And with that, he begins to tell a story, not of kings or empires, but of a woman named Somali, who once used this exact recipe to feed a battalion of farmers during a drought. They had no pots, no fuel, barely enough rice. But she remembered her grandmother's bamboo cooking trick and fed 40 men with nothing but foraged greens and patience. Was she real? You ask. He shrugs. She was to us. Historians still argue whether legends like Somali were based on real figures or just woven from years of oral storytelling. Some say she was a composite of many village women. Others believe she was a historical healer turned folk hero, one who used rice and herbs as medicine. Either way, her story lives in Kralan, and now in your mouth. You eat slowly, savoring each bite. Around the fire, others join, young and old, each bringing their own flavor to the pot. Smoked fish wrapped in wild beetle leaf, crushed peanuts stored in carved bamboo canisters, even tiny pickled frogs served with wild chili salt. Yes, frogs, and yes, they're crunchy. Someone brings out a pot of tuk krong again, the fermented rice water, and passes it around. The warmth spreads through your limbs, and your mind begins to drift. The circle feels sacred, but not in a temple way. It's sacred like a family kitchen, like a place where time sits down beside you, grabs a bowl, and eats too. After the meal, the farmer pulls a small bamboo tube from his satchel, short, capped at both ends. Smell, he says. Inside is smoked salt, gathered from riverbeds, dried in banana leaf trays, and smoked with burnt bamboo. We only use it on story days. What's today? You ask. He raises an eyebrow. You think we'd cook like this on a boring day? The salt is sprinkled over the last bite of rice. It sparks a flavor you didn't know you were missing, like earth, ash, and something faintly floral. The kind of taste that pulls you backward, not forward. As the fire dies down, the villagers gather up the bamboo scraps. Nothing is wasted. The burnt ends are used to fuel tomorrow's kindling. The ash will fertilize the field. The stories told tonight will pass on in someone else's Kralin next season. And as you rise to leave, the little girl who brought you here grabs your hand again. She points to the sky. The moon is rising full and quiet over the trees. Bamboo creaks in the distance, and then, crack! You both grin. It's Somali, she says. You nod, because by now, you believe. You walk back to the village under moonlight, belly full and heart oddly content. Each footstep presses softly into the earth, the night air brushing gently across your skin like the hem of a silk curtain. The bamboo groves sway slowly, their stalks creaking in rhythm with your breath. This is no longer a tour of the past. It's a sleepwalk through history. The farmer is waiting again. He doesn't speak, just gestures upward, to a structure you hadn't noticed before. A watchtower. Made almost entirely of bamboo, it rises like a ghost from the trees, narrow at the base, spiraling higher than you'd expect. You climb? He finally asks, as if it's a challenge. You do. Carefully. The ladder creaks. The rungs bow slightly, but each step feels sturdier than it looks. You reach the platform and gasp, not at the height, but at the view. Below, the rice paddies shimmer like silver puzzle pieces. Each terrace reflects the moonlight differently, like someone took the night sky and poured it upside down. From up here, you can see the scale of it all. Canals that looked like footpaths from ground level now reveal themselves as master-planned veins of the empire. Each bend, each fork, each elevation change, all designed for one purpose: flow. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Khmer Empire constructed one of the most complex hydraulic systems in ancient history. Barrays, man-made reservoirs, canals, and sluice gates that managed floodwaters, stored monsoon rain, and allowed for rice cultivation even during dry seasons. Some of these systems were miles long, feeding thousands of hectares of paddies. From the tower, you trace one of the canals with your eyes as it snakes into the forest. You imagine the engineers, barefoot, ink-stained, tired, calculating gradients with nothing but strings, sticks, and the wisdom of 1,000 harvests. And now for your quirky tidbit. To measure slope and water flow, some Khmer builders used floating mango pits. They'd release them in narrow ditches to gauge speed and flow direction. If the mango pit moved too fast, steep slope. Too slow? Back to digging. The child from earlier clambers up beside you, handing you a small horn made of hollow bamboo. She tells you to blow into it gently. The sound is low and breathy, barely a note, but it echoes. Far off, another horn answers. Then another, a whole sleepy chorus of night callers playing bamboo lullabies across the valley. They tell the buffalo it's time to sleep, she explains. You smile, imagining water buffalo nodding off to woodwind harmonies. And here comes your scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the Khmer's water system was centrally controlled by royal decree or managed locally by village councils. Some inscriptions suggest strict top-down orders. Others hint at a surprisingly democratic structure where farmers had seasonal votes on water shares. From this height, it seems likely both were true. Command from the center, cooperation at the edges. The girl taps your shoulder and points again, this time down at the glowing rectangles of light below. Not firelight. Phosphorescent paddies. You blink, thinking it's a trick of the moon, but she shakes her head. Water snails, she says, and firebugs. Sure enough, dozens, maybe hundreds, of tiny bioluminescent creatures flicker beneath the water's surface. Their glow pulses in time with the frog song, creating a natural nightlight show.
Rice sleeps, she adds, yawning. And so should you.
You lean back on the wooden railing of the watchtower, arms folded behind your head. The night air brushes your face. The sounds blur together. Frogs, insects, wind, water. From this perch, the empire feels less like a kingdom and more like a living machine, soft and strong, old and new, always humming, always adapting. The child begins to hum a tune, a lullaby in a language you don't speak but somehow understand. It drifts through the bamboo, through the dark, down toward the fields where the rice cradles the memories of all who've tended it. You wonder if that's why the Khmer built so high, not just to defend or to survey, but to listen better.
And as the wind rises just slightly, and the bamboo whistles its gentle, hollow notes, you feel yourself floating again. Not on water this time, but on the weightlessness of understanding.
This isn't just a history of rice. It's a story of how people, through simplicity and softness, stayed rooted while reaching upward. Your eyes close. You don't remember falling asleep, only that the breeze sounded like a heartbeat. You wake to a rooster somewhere far away, not a loud one, not the kind you'd expect in a cartoon village, but the kind of rooster that seems to be clearing its throat for 10 minutes before it decides to actually crow. The bamboo watchtower creaks beneath you as you shift. Dew sparkles on every wooden rail. Below, the morning mist is so thick it turns the world into a floating dream of green and gray. You hear soft footsteps on the ladder and then the old farmer's voice. "Today, we build with mud." You raise an eyebrow. "Didn't we already plant in mud?" He grins. "Now we shape it." He leads you away from the tower and down into a shallow basin where the rice paddies give way to strange, low mounds of earth arranged like tiny waves. From above, they might look decorative. Down here, they look like the beginning of something built to last. Today's lesson? Rice dikes. Not walls for defense, but barriers for water. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Khmer farmers constructed long, raised earthen dikes and bunds to contain, divert, and channel water precisely within rice fields. These weren't crude mud piles. They were engineered boundaries, angled for drainage, shaped to retain water just deep enough for optimal rice growth, and curved to reduce erosion from heavy rain. And here's what you don't expect. They're built mostly by hand. You're handed a wide-bladed hoe, a scoop made of buffalo horn, and a smile from the oldest woman in the village who says, "You're going to hate your back tonight." She's not wrong. You begin scooping earth, patting it down with your feet, building soft, sturdy lips around square plots of soggy land. Each dike must be wide enough to walk on, but narrow enough not to waste growing space. As the sun rises higher, the field becomes a dance floor of squishing, splashing, and grunting. The children sing a simple rhythm to keep pace. Step, scoop, stomp, pat. Step, scoop, stomp, pat. You laugh at first, then you get into the groove. Then your thighs start to protest. Here's your quirky detail. In some Khmer farming traditions, young lovers would meet and flirt while building dikes together. The work was backbreaking, but the custom said whoever could balance a bamboo pole on their shoulders while singing and stomping at the same time was fit to marry. You're not trying to impress anyone, but when the girl from last night giggles at your lack of balance, you find yourself trying anyway. She tosses you a flower. You drop your scoop. "Well," says the farmer, "you're not married yet." By midday, the dikes stretch in gentle arcs across the fields, dividing them like rice paper fans. The water, once wild, now curls obediently around your mud walls. And this brings us to your scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether these dike systems were standardized across the empire, or if each village developed its own unique design. Some patterns appear uniform from satellite maps. Others are so organically shaped, they seem more musical than mathematical, following old songs, not blueprints. As you work, you begin to feel it too. This isn't just engineering, it's land choreography. The dikes bend where the earth wants to curve. They straighten where the sun lingers longest. And they always flow toward someone's memory. When the sun dips low again, the workers gather on the highest dike and pull out woven baskets filled with sticky rice dumplings wrapped in lotus leaves. You sit and peel yours open. Steam unfurls, carrying scents of lemongrass and chili. A nearby elder sprinkles hers with powdered roasted rice and salt. "Eat with your feet in the mud," she advises. "Helps digestion." You do. And something about it feels right. As you chew, you look back at the day's work, dozens of dikes gently bowing across the land, like the rice fields are smiling in sleep. And then, pop. Another bamboo explosion cracks in the far forest. A hush falls over the group. Someone whispers, "They're still listening." You ask who. The elder shrugs. "The ancestors, the frogs, the water. Take your pick." In Khmer thought, you're beginning to understand, the world is not divided into animate and inanimate. The world is a conversation, and every stone, leaf, and frog is talking back. You walk back to the village in silence. The dikes glow golden in the last light of day. A boy walks beside you, carrying a tiny flute made of rice straw. He plays a tune. No one taught him. He says the melody came from the mud. You believe him, because you're starting to hear it too. You awaken the next morning not to a rooster, but to the sound of sweeping, soft, rhythmic, precise. When you step outside the thatched hut where you slept, the entire village is awake, barefoot, and sweeping the paths with bundles of twigs bound together with strips of coconut fiber. The air smells of damp earth, faint wood smoke, and early morning jasmine. The mood is quiet, not hurried, not sleepy, just measured. Everyone knows what they're doing, and no one is rushing. It's the kind of morning where even the birds seem to chirp in low voices. Today's lesson won't involve climbing towers or slogging through fields. Today, the farmer explains, is about harmony. He leads you to a quiet edge of the village where an elderly man sits beside what looks like a bamboo weaving frame. Laid out before him is something oddly beautiful. Thin ribbons of palm, strips of reed, threads of bark, all braided together into a mat the size of a bed. "Sleeping mat?" you ask. The farmer shakes his head. No, field calendar. And that's when it gets interesting. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Khmer Empire used not just astronomy but woven agricultural calendars, handmade mats or scrolls that recorded planting seasons, moon cycles, and flood patterns. Passed from elder to child, they served as both almanac and oral history tool. The shapes, colors, and even knot placements had meanings. One line marked the start of the rainy season. Another indicated when to flood the paddies. Think of it as a Fitbit made of bamboo and palm, but gentler. You kneel beside the old man as he works, watching his fingers knot two reeds together. "This one," he murmurs, "tells us when the frogs will start singing louder than the birds." "Is that a scientific measurement?" you ask. He grins. "It's never wrong." Here's your quirky tidbit. Some Khmer farmers believed that when frogs outsang birds for 3 consecutive mornings, it signaled a shift in atmospheric pressure, and thus the beginning of a proper monsoon. Frogs, it turns out, are better meteorologists than most smartphones. You lean in to study the mat. One section is darker than the others, stained with something like charcoal. "That's the hungry moon," the old man whispers. "No planting, no weddings, just patience." A chill runs up your spine, not from fear, but from the feeling that you're touching a kind of ancient wisdom made soft. The farmer adds, "This knowledge wasn't carved in stone because stone can't bend, but reeds remember." As the day unfolds, you're handed your own bundle of fibers. Under the guidance of 3 patient women and one overly opinionated goat who keeps chewing the wrong end of your mat, you begin your own mini calendar. Each knot is a question. Each row is a memory. And here's the scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether these woven calendars were standardized across the Khmer Empire or if they were hyper-local, tailored to each village's unique microclimate. Some researchers believe they mirrored temple carvings. Others say they were never written down because they were never meant to be owned. As you weave, the women hum a lullaby in looping cadences. The notes twist like the reeds in your hands, and soon your fingers fall into a rhythm, over, under, tie, pull. You ask what the song means. One woman pauses. It means, don't chase the water, let it find you. You stop weaving, just for a second. That feels important. In the afternoon, you're invited to join a storytelling circle. Elders sit in the shade with fans made from banana leaves, passing around a pot of cooled rice water. Children cluster at their feet, eating candied tamarind from tiny clay bowls. The story being told is not about a king, not about conquest, but about a woman who once wove a mat so perfectly it made the rains fall exactly when they were needed. Her village never suffered a drought again. True story? You whisper. The old man beside you shrugs. Did the rains fall? You nod. Then it's true enough. By sunset, your mat is finished. Not perfect, slightly crooked in the middle, one knot obviously reversed. But it's yours. A memory, woven strand by strand. You lay it out in front of your hut that night. The stars above are so numerous they look like scattered rice. You lie down on your creation, staring up, and you feel a strange alignment, like your breath is syncing with the soil, the air, the frogs. And from somewhere in the reeds nearby, that bamboo flute plays again. Low, patient, off-key, and perfect. The morning mist is heavier today. It curls around the village like a silk scarf wrapping itself around old stories. You rise from your mat, now dry and a little rough beneath your hands. The air smells like wet wood, lemongrass, and something faintly sweet, maybe overripe jackfruit or the ashes from last night's quiet fires. There's no breakfast waiting, no farmer, no little girl tugging your sleeve, just the faint thump, 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 echoing in the distance. A steady rhythm, not unlike a heartbeat. You follow the sound. It leads you out of the rice fields and into a clearing you've never seen before. There, beneath a large overhang of woven thatch, are 6 women sitting cross-legged around a row of smooth stone bowls. Each woman holds a long wooden pestle, and they rise and fall in perfect unison. Thump, thump, pause, thump. They are pounding rice, but not for eating. Today you're about to learn what rice can become, when it's not a meal, but a message. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In Khmer villages, especially in the Angkorian era, rice wasn't just consumed. It was used in rituals, ceremonies, and even construction. Ground into powder, fermented, mixed with lime or sap, it was part of mortars, sealants, even early forms of waterproofing. Some monks used rice paste as a binding agent for palm leaf manuscripts. Others painted with it, literally using rice slurry as ink primer for temple murals. You sit among the women. One hands you a pestle, far too heavy for comfort, and you clumsily try to match their rhythm. Your pestle hits off-beat. The woman beside you smiles, doesn't say a word, and just adjusts her elbow with a gentle nudge. In minutes, you're moving as they do. It feels less like labor and more like drumming with the ground. Then comes your quirky detail. Before using pounded rice for ceremonial purposes, some Khmer elders believed the grains must first listen. That's right. The rice would be placed beside sleeping babies for a full night, so it could absorb innocence. If the baby cried, the rice was considered spiritually unready and had to be fed to chickens instead. You're not sure if that's superstition or psychology, but you do notice a pile of rice sitting quietly next to a toddler snoring on a hammock nearby. After an hour, your arms are noodles, but your rice powder is, well, powdery. One of the women sifts it carefully through a fine woven net. Another adds ash and water. A third begins painting with it, on bark, on banana leaves, on scraps of polished wood. And here's the scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether Khmer rice-based materials influenced early temple construction, or if that's folklore exaggerating their usage. Some ancient recipes call for a blend of crushed snail shells, river silt, and fermented rice to create a kind of eco-concrete. Others suggest these techniques were limited to rural rituals and never scaled. You ask the woman with the paintbrush what she's making. A prayer, she replies. It looks like swirls of smoke and fish fins and spiraling stars. The rice paste dries fast in the sun. Another woman begins layering it with crushed ochre for red, tamarind bark for brown, and indigo root for deep blue. The final image is not grand, it's quiet. A hand extended over water, a single grain of rice resting on the palm, a child asleep nearby. You realize suddenly that this isn't meant for temples or kings. It's meant for memory. The kind of memory that only lives when held in someone's hands. As the day ends, the women fold the painted bark into a scroll, tie it with banana fiber, and hand it to you. Keep it dry, one warns. What happens if it gets wet? You ask. She smiles. Then it becomes a part of the land again. And somehow, that doesn't feel like a loss. You walk back to your hut as the sun sets. The scroll tucked in your shirt is warm from your body heat. You can feel the rice fibers shifting slightly with each step, like it's breathing with you. That night, you sit by your mat and open it one last time. The painting still glows faintly in the dim light, and for a long while, you just sit there. No words, no commentary. Just listening, because maybe that's what the rice always did best. It listened to storms, to footsteps, to drums, to babies, to history, and now to you. By now, the village feels like home, softly lit, gently humming, and always smelling faintly of warm rice and wood smoke. You wake to the subtle rustle of palm leaves, the chirp of sleepy birds, and, oddly, the sound of metal tapping against wood. When you step outside, the air is thick with anticipation. Something is being built. You follow the noise past the familiar paths and rice terraces to a quiet bend in the canal where a group of villagers have gathered around a half-finished boat. Long, slim, and elegant, resting like a sleeping crocodile on a frame of wooden stilts. The farmer waves you over with a smile. Today, he says, we're not just growing rice. We're sending it. Transport. The part of history people often skip, assuming rice just magically made it to the markets and palaces. But today, you'll learn the hidden superpower of the Khmer Empire. Water logistics. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Khmer Empire constructed one of the most sophisticated networks of irrigation canals, river ports, and transport vessels in the ancient world. Rice wasn't just grown in clever paddies, it was moved with purpose, often by dugout canoes and long, slender river boats, to supply cities like Angkor with enough food to sustain enormous populations. You're handed a small wooden mallet and asked to help shape a rudder. It's harder than it looks. The boat builders move gracefully, sanding, lashing, heating planks with slow-burning coals to bend the wood like ribbon. There's no shouting, no urgency, only quiet cooperation and the occasional joke about how last year's boat only spun in circles. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some Khmer villages, the first boat built after a good harvest was not used for transport. Instead, it was set afloat with offerings, fruit, cloth, even tiny rice dolls, to thank the river for its role. If the boat sank, the river was full. If it drifted gently, the year would be smooth. You notice one such ceremonial boat tied to a tree nearby, painted bright red, its bow carved into a Naga serpent, now faded and moss-covered. It's a beautiful relic, gently rotting with dignity. As you sand the edge of the rudder, you hear laughter. A child and her father are using half coconut shells as paddles in a tiny dugout bowl of a boat, splashing each other with water the color of green tea. The child is winning, and the father pretends to tip over in defeat. Further down the canal, elders are inspecting bundles of rice already packed into woven reed baskets, sealed with beeswax and tied with vines. They're being sorted by grain type: sticky, long, fragrant, purple, and destination. And here's your scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether Khmer rice transport was state-coordinated, driven by imperial bureaucracy, or a grassroots network run by regional families and monks. Some records describe tax boats, others depict festivals where communities celebrated the launching of the season. Was it commerce, ceremony, or both? You pause and ask the boatmaker, "Who decides where the rice goes?" He shrugs. "The rice does." You laugh, thinking it's a joke. He doesn't laugh back. He just continues lashing a plank to the hull, humming under his breath, a tune you don't know but feel like you've heard before. In the afternoon, after hours of sanding and lifting and only slightly bruising your thumb, you help push one of the finished boats into the water. It floats like a whisper. A woman steps into it gracefully, balancing a long pole, her back straight as a statue. The children cheer. The boat glides